We're now moving from India to China and a whole different cultural tradition. In terms of China itself, of course, the landscape is very varied. We have everything from sandy plains and mighty rivers to towering mountains and farmland. We see cultural and political bounds that have shifted regularly throughout the millennia. And China currently includes Tibet, Chinese Turkestan, and Manchuria, although at times it has also included Mongolia and Korea. We also see many dialects and separate languages. However, writing tends to be common and unites the people of China in religious, literary, and philosophical traditions. So as we look at China, we actually see a great deal of ethnographic diversity, number of different ethnic groups. And that's something we don't tend to think about, but it does play into much of the Chinese art that we're going to look at, because different ethnic groups will hold power at different times. Yes, some will not hold power, but most will hold power at certain periods. We're going to start with the first emperor. Now, the armies of the Qin ruler eventually will conquer China, and between 211 and 210 BCE, he takes the title of emperor. He will also order the first construction of the Great Wall. He will consolidate rule through central bureaucracy, standard language, and I'm talking about governmental standard language. Obviously, if you go to China, there are several strong dialects and languages in use. We see a use of weights, of standardized weights, measures, and coinage, which is necessary for trade. He also represses schools of thought other than legalism, which espouses absolute obedience to state authority. For obvious reasons, this is going to be favorable. And he replaces feudal lords with salaried administrators and creates a meritocracy. He also creates, during this Qin dynasty, he will create the Terracotta Army. About 700,000 laborers will fill the first emperor's tomb with treasure. And what we find, these are the pits as you see them today, but here's a better reconstruction of what this might look like. We see pits discovered around the tomb containing over 6,000 life-sized, painted terracotta soldiers. And this was meant to be a bodyguard in perpetuity. It's also known as the Lintong Army, and lesser versions have been found near other tombs. Now, in all these cases, with all these figures, they're all created with molds, but there are different molds for different parts. So you would have separate, say, 4 or 5 different hand molds, 4 or 5 different leg molds, arms, short tunic, torso, head, etc. And by the time you work out the math on that, you can end up with a situation where no 2 of the 6,000 terracotta warriors are identical. Even though they look like they should be, none of them are. And then to add to that, in each soldier's case, they add hand modeling, which allows for greater variety. So they're going in by hand and making small alterations to each form so that they are individual, yet when seen from a distance, they appear as a group. They were also, of course, painted. And this all results in a balance of uniformity and individuality. Imagine if you went to a military parade, even in the United States today. From a distance, in uniform, all of these soldiers look identical, but as you get closer, you see those personal variations, and that's what they're mimicking here in the Terracotta Army. Now, the problem with the Terracotta Army in terms of paint is as we unearth these figures, the humidity level changes instantly. Of course, the soil keeps them much more moist than they would be if they had been kept open all these years. So the paint, as that moisture runs out of the paint, flakes off, usually within 24 to 48 hours. Now, in some cases, as you see in the left, we can preserve that, so we have some idea of what these look like. On the right is a recreation of just how bright these were all painted. And it's a lot brighter than we tend to think of, but then again, the pieces that we look at are old. We're talking something that's over 2,000 years old, so of course it's going to have faded over time. But you can just imagine how remarkable the scene would be to see 6,000 of these just before they get buried.